Hello and welcome to the first class on the course Introduction to Advanced Cognitive Processes. I am Dr. Ark Verma. I am an Assistant Professor of Psychology and Cognitive Science at the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. Let us begin talking about something that will be the course matter of this entire course and has been that of an earlier course as well. We are going to talk broadly about cognition in this course. What is cognition? If I look to Wikipedia and if I try and get the most simple, most basic definition of cognition, that basically includes or let me read out that definition to you. The definition says cognition is a mental action or process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience and the senses. So, there are three things through which you get knowledge. First is thought, second is experience and the third is senses. We will talk about all three of these things as we move ahead in the course. Now, what do these things comprise of? The definition says that it encompasses processes such as attention, memory, knowledge, visual imagery, comprehension and production of language, problem solving, creativity, reasoning and decision making. There could be other things as well, say for example, cognition and emotion, and we have not really mentioned perception here as well. But this basic definition of cognition tells you that cognition probably is almost everything that you do, everything that you experience, and how do you learn from that experience and how do you behave after you have had that experience. That is pretty much what cognition is about. In this course, Introduction to Advanced Cognitive Processes, I will be covering a subset of what cognition actually talks about. Before I move ahead with this course, in this first lecture, I would like to introduce you to some of the structural elements of the course. What are we going to cover, the subject matter and other things. Some of you might remember I offered a course on Introduction to Basic Cognitive Processes earlier in NPTEL, and that might be available for you to view in YouTube or other channels as well. But that course was a basic course on cognitive psychology, wherein I covered a small subset of what cognitive psychology is all about. I began with talking about foundational issues in cognitive psychology, then we did a little bit of a historical background of where cognitive psychology is actually coming from. If some of you are psychology students, you would remember that psychology starts somewhere around the time when Wilhelm Wundt established the first psychology lab, and there were so many movements within psychology after that. We have actually, in this historical background on cognitive psychology, tried to cover up the philosophical antecedents of psychology as well. So, we talk about foundations of cognitive psychology. What is cognitive psychology actually about? Is it different from general psychology, or let us say a health psychology or clinical psychology? How is it different? And those kind of things we have covered in the last course. Also, I talked about a small introduction of cognitive neuroscience, which is an important aspect of doing cognitive psychology. Say cognitive psychology attempts to explain and understand cognitive processes. It also in some sense tries to give an introduction about how the brain is an integral part of these cognitive processes. Therein where cognitive neuroscience comes in. Cognitive neuroscience is basically a field which seeks to connect the behavior to the brain. And how does the brain contribute to various human behaviors, and say for example, even if you are talking about simple things such as perception, how is the brain contributing to perception? What is it that the brain is actually doing here, the areas of the brain which are involved. So, that is what I did in Introduction to Cognitive Neuroscience. Then we talked about research methodology in psychology in general, and also we talked about research methodology in cognitive psychology. Some of the experiments and the methods that I will be talking about in this course, we have given a small introduction to them, say for example, reaction time experiments or fMRI neuroimaging experiments, EEG, ERP experiments, and a brief introduction to these methodologies has been given in an earlier course. However, it does not mean that when I am talking about these methods in this course, I will not be explaining or will not be discussing them in some detail. Certainly, to people who have not taken the earlier course, it should not be that you will miss out on a lot if you are doing this course alone. So, even though the discussion is somewhere based in it starts from the last course, There is no requirement as such to do that course before you take this course. You can obviously take this course as well, and if you have time or interest, you could go back to the earlier course as well. So that kind of gives you a proper background into the things we will be talking about in this course. We talked about perception in detail, we talked about vision, we talked about audition, we talked a little bit about other perceptual processes as well. And I remember talking about the basic theory of different schools in visual perception and what were the different theoreticians saying, and things like, say for example, how does perception and action interact, and how the perception action coupling leads to particular kinds of behavior. So, I have talked about perception in great detail in that course, and if you are interested, you are invited to go there. We talked about attention, various types of attention, we talked about divided attention, we talked about concentrated attention, we talked about attentional phenomena like visual search, change blindness, attention blink, those kind of things. We have also talked already about memory and its various types, say for example, short term memory, long term memory. We talked about working memory in a lot of detail, and we discussed some of the studies, some of the research findings about that. We also talked about various processes that are involved in memory, various sources of errors in memory, and so on and so forth. So, this is all what I have covered till now in a previous course called Introduction to Basic Cognitive Processes. Now, given that all of these topics have been covered in sufficient detail, I did not really want to cover everything else in this small course. So, for that reason, for the topics that were left uncovered in the earlier course, I am offering this course here, which is referred to as Introduction to Advanced Cognitive Processes. Slide in the introduction presentation, if you would have seen, I have differentiated between what is an advanced cognitive processes or what is a basic cognitive process. However, there is not a lot to that distinction that one needs to make. The only thing one needs to understand is that this distinction that I am making here is probably borrowed from Jerry Fodor, where he talks about horizontal and vertical faculties. Now, horizontal faculties are supposed to be more basic cognitive functions or more basic mental abilities that people use and invoke in pretty much everything that they are doing. The concept of advanced cognitive processes borrows from vertical faculties, things like knowledge, decision making, problem solving, which draw upon those basic processes, but are independent behaviors in their own right. So, that is one of the reasons, again it is a slightly superficial distinction that one makes between higher or advanced basic cognitive processes, but also for a better organization of material, I kind of split the two into two different split these into two different courses. What will I be talking about in this course? I will be talking about knowledge, I will be talking about various theories of knowledge, how say for example, knowledge is structured in our conceptual world, how is knowledge structured in the brain. We will be talking about theories of knowledge, say for example, semantic networks, how do people make categories, etc. All of that I will be talking about in this course. I will be talking about visual imagery, what are the different theories of visual imagery, how have people attempted to understand visual imagery, how closely or distinctly it is linked with things like perception, action, thought processes, those things we will talk about in this course. We will also give an extended time to language, we will talk about evolution of language, we will talk about comprehension, production of language, reading, and those different things. Also, I will be covering topics like reasoning and decision making, we will be talking about problem solving and creativity, and at some point I will also try and give a developmental perspective of how people acquire these different mental phenomena. How does one let us say begin to acquire language in great detail, or how does one begin to acquire let us say different mental abilities like decision making and those kind of things. I will probably have a section on cognitive disorders as well, wherein I will talk about what happens when people have disorders of language, say for example aphasias or dyslexias or those kind of things. Then I have kept a section on section on miscellaneous topics wherein I might be talking about certain important topics in cognitive psychology or in cognition which I have not covered yet or which I have not covered till now. Those could be single lectures on single topics or 2-3 lectures on a single topic or something like that. So, I will try and organize that according to this. So, this is pretty much what we are going to be doing in this current course. let me talk a little bit about the structure of the course. So, this course is divided into 8 weeks. There will be 40 lectures, 5 of them every week, and at the end of every week you will get a weekly assignment. Now, if you see this distribution here, there are 8 topics here, and one of my attempts will be towards keeping each week for each of these separate topics. However, we might discover during the course that whether I am able to follow this strict demarcation or not, but the idea is that each week will broadly try to cover one topic, say for example language or knowledge, etc. And each lecture, so if there are 5 lectures under knowledge, each of them will try and talk about different things. Say for example, if you are specifically interested in one particular aspect of knowledge, you can actually go down to that lecture and read about it. Also, there will be weekly assignments. So, every week you will get a weekly assignment at the end of 5 lectures, and these weekly assignments will most probably be multiple choice questions, and these multiple choice questions will be drawn from the material that I am delivering in these video lectures. There is also an aspect of final exam that is necessary to those who want the certification from NPTEL for having done this course, and this final exam will basically have almost 50 multiple choice questions, basically drawing again from the material that I have covered in these video lectures. Now, what kind of study material we might be able to provide? So, the study material basically only comprises of the video lectures that are going to be available. They are going to be made available on a week by week basis, and you can also visit the NPTEL website for references from where the material for these video lectures is being arranged for. So, I have actually pointed out a few books, a couple of reference books, some articles might be there which you can actually get hold of in order to have a more detailed knowledge of this. However, for the exam or for any of the assessments, the questions are basically made from the video lecture. So, in case you are being able to attend all of these video lectures, you do not need any extra material. Obviously, if you need to read more about things than I have talked, you are free to actually look up these books, find out find out where you can get them and read them. We will not be able to provide any kind of reading material other than these video lectures. So, everything asked during the assessment will basically be only from the video lectures. Now, students are also encouraged to use any open source material from the web pertaining to the topics that I will be covering. Pretty much any book that you can find on the internet which is a textbook in cognitive psychology will have almost everything that I am going to talk about in any way. So, if you do not get if you are actually in need of more detailed study material, something like a textbook, I would advise you to look on the net, and you might find a lot of open source textbooks that are available there. Now, who will the course be beneficial to? Bachelor's and master's students of psychology, also of cognitive science, cognitive neuroscience, and so many other fields. Anybody who is interested in human behavior, who is working on parts of human behavior, say for example, a lot of people in marketing and in sales want to know a little bit about human behavior. They might want to know a little bit about how research in cognitive psychology can help them. You can take this course for those ideas as well. For professionals working in any area which basically involves working with human client and which involves client and person interaction, you would basically like this course. Also, for people who are working in design, who would want to design products and who would want to design user interfaces, parts of this course might be useful for you as well. Teachers who are involved in teaching psychology at various levels, or cognitive psychology, neuropsychology, or cognitive neuroscience, might also find the material covered in this course useful. So, that is all from my side. I wish you good luck for this course, and I hope that you complete the course and appear in the examination for getting the certificate. Thank you.